Have you ever wondered why some people seem destined for greatness from birth while others struggle their entire lives for recognition? What if I told you that one of history's most famous battles for destiny began not on a battlefield, but in a mother's womb? Two in conflict before they even drew breath would shape the course of nations and reveal profound truths about divine purpose that still echo through our world today. This is the story of Jacob and Esau, twin sons born into promise but divided by ambition. Their tale isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting the deepest struggles of the human heart, the complex relationship between divine election and human choice, and the mysterious ways that God's plans unfold through our most flawed moments. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about fairness, birthright, and the nature of blessing itself. Before we dive deep into this extraordinary narrative, let me warn you. This story contains deception that would make modern politicians blush, family dysfunction that rivals any soap opera, and divine intervention so unexpected they'll leave you questioning the very nature of justice. But by the end of this journey, you'll understand why this ancient family drama holds keys to understanding your own purpose and calling. Drop a 777 in the comments if you're ready to uncover the shocking truth about when brothers fought for destiny. And make sure to subscribe because what we're about to explore will transform how you see God's hand in the messiest moments of life. The stage for this epic confrontation was set long before the twins were even conceived. Abraham, the father of faith, had received a divine promise that would echo through generations. God had sworn to make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Through his lineage, all nations of the earth would be blessed. This wasn't merely a family promise, it was a cosmic covenant that would reshape the spiritual landscape of humanity. Isaac, Abraham's miracle child, born to parents far beyond childbearing years, carried this weighty inheritance. But as years passed, a familiar shadow fell across the promise. Isaac's wife Rebekah was barren just as Sarah had been before her. For 20 long years they waited. 20 years of prayers, of hope deferred, of watching the divine promise seem to slip further into impossibility with each passing season. Can you imagine the weight of carrying such a promise while facing such silence from heaven? Isaac had grown up hearing stories of God's miraculous intervention in his parents' lives. He had been the miracle child, saved from sacrifice at the last moment when God provided a ram in the thicket. Yet now, in his own desperate need, seemed distant and unresponsive. But God's timing is rarely our timing, and his methods often confound human expectations. When Isaac was 60 years old, his persistent prayers were finally answered. Rebekah conceived, but this pregnancy would be unlike any other in the annals of human history. From the very beginning, something extraordinary was happening within her womb. Yes, the Hebrew text describes a violent struggle taking place before birth. The word used suggests a crushing, a breaking, a conflict so intense that Rebekah feared for her life. These weren't gentle kicks or normal fetal movements. This was warfare in the womb, a battle that seemed to threaten the very promise of God. In her distress, Rebekah cried out to the Lord, asking why she had to endure such torment if this was the answer to their prayers. God's response would set the trajectory for centuries of human history. He revealed to Rebekah that she carried not just twins but two nations within her womb. Two peoples would emerge from her body and they would be divided against each other. The older would serve the younger, completely overturning the ancient customs of birthright and blessing. This prophecy was revolutionary. In the ancient world, primogeniture was sacred. The firstborn inherited the father's authority, wealth, and blessing. It was an unchangeable law of nature and society. Yet God was declaring that his purposes would flow through the younger son, the one who had no natural claim to leadership. When the day of birth finally arrived, the conflict that had raged in the womb continued into the world. Esau emerged first, covered in red hair, earning him a name that would forever mark his identity. He was ruddy, robust, clearly destined for the outdoors and physical pursuits. But immediately following him came his brother, grasping Esau's heel as if trying to prevent his escape. This second son was named Jacob, meaning heel grasper or supplanter. From his very first breath, Jacob seemed determined to overtake his brother, to claim what belonged to the firstborn. The imagery is striking and prophetic. Here was a child who would spend his life grasping, scheming, and struggling to secure what he believed was rightfully his. As the boys grew, their differences became more pronounced. Esau developed into everything you'd expect from a firstborn heir. He was a skilled hunter, a man of the field, comfortable in the wilderness and capable of providing for his family through strength and cunning. His father Isaac loved him, perhaps seeing in Esau's outdoor skills an echo of his own father Abraham's nomadic lifestyle. Jacob, by contrast, was described as a quiet man who stayed among the tents. The Hebrew suggests someone thoughtful, contemplative, perhaps even studious. While Esau roamed the countryside pursuing game, Jacob remained close to home, learning the ways of shepherding and agriculture. His mother Rebekah favored him, possibly recognizing in her younger son the qualities needed to carry forward the spiritual heritage of Abraham. This family dynamic created a powder keg of resentment and competition. Two parents, each with a favorite son. Two brothers, each representing different approaches to life. Two destinies seemingly at odds with divine promise and human expectation. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the true nature of blessing of Go, the complexities, choices, and the dangerous intersection of human ambition with divine purpose. But there was drama real yet to come. Hidden beneath the surface of this family tension lay questions that would challenge everything the ancient world believed about worthiness, justice, and the nature of God's favor. Was divine blessing truly tied to birth order and physical strength? Could cunning and determination override the sacred laws of inheritance? And what happens when human scheming collides with divine sovereignty? The answers to these questions would emerge through events so shocking, so morally complex that they continue to generate debate thousands of years later. The catalyst for the first great confrontation came through something as simple as a bowl of stew. It was one of those moments that seem insignificant in the present but cast shadows across generations. Esau had been out hunting, pursuing game across the rugged wilderness that surrounded their camp. Hours turned into a full day, and when he finally returned, he was famished beyond measure. The Hebrew text paints a vivid picture of his condition. Esau was ayef, utterly exhausted, his strength completely depleted. This wasn't ordinary hunger, this was the bone-deep weariness that comes from pushing the human body beyond its limits. He stumbled into camp, his vision probably blurred, his hands trembling from exertion and emptiness. And there was Jacob, quietly tending a pot of red lentil stew. The aroma filled the air, rich and nourishing, exactly what a starving man's body craved. In that moment, something primal overtook Esau's reasoning. The immediate need overwhelmed any consideration of long-term consequences. Here was sustenance, here was relief from his suffering, and nothing else mattered. But Jacob saw opportunity where others might have seen a brother in need. This wasn't spontaneous compassion or simple hospitality. The text suggests calculation, a moment of recognition that destiny might be seized through circumstance. When Esau begged for the red stew, literally saying, "Let me gulp down some of that red stuff," Jacob's response revealed the depths of his ambition. "Sell me your birthright first." 5 words that would echo through eternity. Not "let me help you, brother," not "sit down and eat." But a transaction, a bargain struck at the moment of greatest vulnerability. Jacob understood what many of us forget. Desperate people make desperate choices, and those choices often have consequences far beyond what they imagine in their moment of need. Think about this for a moment. The birthright wasn't just about inheritance or family position. In their culture, it represented spiritual authority, the responsibility to carry forward the covenant promises of Abraham. It meant being the conduit through which God's blessings would flow to future generations. The firstborn was meant to be the priest of the family, the one who interceded with heaven on behalf of his descendants. Esau's response reveals everything about his character and values. "Look, I am about to die," he said. "What good is a birthright to me?" In his mind, spiritual inheritance meant nothing if he didn't survive the day. The eternal was sacrificed for the temporal, the sacred traded for the immediate. But was this truly just about hunger? Or does this moment reveal something deeper about Esau's heart? The scriptures later describe him as godless, someone who treated sacred things with contempt. Perhaps his willingness to trade away his birthright so easily exposed an attitude that had been developing for years. Maybe he had never truly valued what he stood to inherit. Jacob, meanwhile, wasn't satisfied with a casual agreement. He demanded an oath, a binding commitment that couldn't be reversed later when Esau's hunger was satisfied and his judgment cleared. The transaction was sealed with the solemnity of a legal contract. Esau swore away his birthright for a bowl of stew, and Jacob secured through cunning what birth order had denied him. The meal that followed must have been one of the most expensive in human history. Every spoonful cost Esau a portion of his spiritual inheritance. Every swallow diminished his claim to the promises of God, and when he was finished, when his immediate hunger was satisfied, the text tells us he got up and left, treating the entire exchange as if it were of no importance. This is where the story becomes deeply unsettling for modern readers. We want to condemn Jacob for his manipulation, for taking advantage of his brother's weakness. We want to sympathize with Esau, the victim of circumstance and cunning. But the biblical narrative doesn't allow such simple moral categories. Years later, the Apostle Paul would describe Esau as someone who, for a single meal, sold his inheritance as the oldest son. The writer of Hebrews would call him godless, warning believers not to follow his example. These weren't condemnations of his hunger, but of his priorities. They that consistently revealed a heart chose the immediate over the eternal, the physical over the spiritual. Yet Jacob's methods were hardly praiseworthy. His name, remember, meant supplanter, and he was living up to every implication of that identity. He was willing to exploit family relationships for personal gain. He showed no mercy to a brother in distress. His calculating actions reveal nature that would later bring years of conflict and exile. This is the mystery that makes this story so compelling and so troubling. God had already declared that the older would serve the younger. The divine purpose was already established. So why the deception? Why the manipulation? Why couldn't Jacob simply wait for God to fulfill his promise in his own way and time? Perhaps the answer lies in understanding the difference between divine sovereignty and human responsibility. God's purposes are certain, but they often unfold through the choices of flawed human beings. Jacob's methods were questionable, but his desire for the blessing was not. Unlike Esau, he recognized the value of what was at stake, but the birthright was only the beginning. The greater prize, the one that would ultimately determine the flow of God's covenant promises, was still to come. Isaac still possessed the patriarchal blessing, the spiritual authority to pass on the divine inheritance, and as the aging patriarch prepared to bestow this final gift, both sons would discover that the battle for destiny was far from over. The stage was set for deception so audacious it would reshape the foundations of faith itself. The story of Jacob and Esau forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about divine purpose and human nature. Here were two brothers, locked in conflict from the womb, whose struggles reveal the mysterious ways God works through our most flawed moments. Jacob, the deceiver who grasped his brother's heel from birth, would become Israel, the father of 12 tribes. Esau, the firstborn who despised his birthright, would father nations but lose his place in the covenant line. What does this ancient family drama teach us today? That God's purposes often unfold through the most unlikely people using the most questionable methods. That spiritual inheritance isn't about birth order or natural ability, but about recognizing the eternal value of divine promises. That sometimes those who seem destined for greatness stumble over their own appetites, while those who hunger for heaven's blessing find ways to secure what others casually discard. The battle between these brothers reminds us that our own destinies aren't determined by circumstances of birth, but by what we choose to value when the stakes are highest. In our desperate moments, what are we willing to trade away? And in our calculating moments, what are we willing to fight for? If this story stirred something in your heart, share it with someone who needs to understand that God can work through their mess too. Subscribe for more biblical narratives that challenge everything you thought you knew about faith. And remember that sometimes the most unlikely people become the most unlikely heroes in God's eternal story.